My name's Chris.
And I'm Kristie.
This is the Washing Up Podcast. And look, we're not going to muck around today.
No, we're very serious.
We're very serious. We're always deeply serious.
Hardcore journalism, right here.
We've had a lot of awesome people that we've got to speak to on this podcast from around the world. But ladies and gentlemen,
oh my God,
it's Bruno.
Hello guys, nice to be on the show with you. That's exciting.
It is.
Bonjour.
Bonjour.
Kristie is the queen of accents, so you'll get a lot of them.
Yeah.
You'll get
international woman, Maya.
You are the international superstar, but this is really the international
international superstar.
It is an absolute delight to get to speak to you. And I mean, part of the benefit of getting to speak to you now, obviously, is that the Great Canadian Baking Show's finally actually made it to Australian televisions.
I've seen it. I saw it on the social media. I'm like, oh my God, that's exciting.
Probably a little bit behind.
Uh-huh.
But it
took a while to get down under,
Yeah, it did. I mean, we've been doing the show for a number of years, largely to a Canadian audience.
Uh-huh.
But also, we've had a lot of Australians who have been messaging us over the last couple of years because they genuinely just love watching you on the show. So this is an absolute treat for a lot of them as well.
Yes.
To get to have this conversation. So what I wanted to just sort of start with is for people who don't know, just your general background in food, because it's quite, serious and quite a lot.
Yeah, well, my dream was to be an airline pilot. Actually,
that turned out well, and you've still got time.
And but in France, the school system is very elitist, very selective.
Yep.
So I ended up being kicked out from school when I was 15, and I had to find something to learn the trade. And I found this old chocolate shop in my hometown.
Ooh.
That were looking for an apprentice. And in France, the apprentice system is very good. It's very hard, but it's very good because you learn everything from scratch.
Yeah.
And that shop used to make everything from scratch. We have equipment. They used to have a system of belt on the ceiling. And, you have to cranking the belt to start a mixer. I mean, the place was like over 120 years old.
Yep.
Wow.
But I learned everything from scratch. So you understand the value of craft and skills. If you don't have those two items, it's very difficult to understand cooking. And then I embarked on a great journey, no regret. I worked with great chefs in France, but I always felt France was, it's a great place to live. It's a great place to learn, but it's very narrow.
Yeah.
And that creates narrow-minded people. And
Yes,
the French,
the
French have the bad habit to believe they are the best in the world in cooking. And that, I didn't want to be part of that thinking. So I left France when I was 23, I think. Get a backpack and I moved to the States with no plan. I mean, I landed in New York and me and a friend, we spent a lot of money eating in restaurants.
Oh.
I mean, when I was in France, I worked in a place where we had a lot of young Americans coming to study with us. So we met, and Americans are very cool and relaxed, and they were all from California. So I made good friends.
That's why they're cool and relaxed.
Yeah. And they say, oh, come over, you think you're going to love it. And, so I got a ticket, moved to New York, stayed there for a few weeks, then moved to Los Angeles. And I got, again, very lucky because I met that chef who really, at that time, was with Wolfgang Puck, the top chef in LA, Joachim Splichol.
Oh, wow.
And we opened Patina restaurant.
Yep.
And the day we opened, we were packed. And it's still, I mean, if you're in LA today, the Los Angeles restaurant scene, about 40% of the chef went through Joachim cooking system.
Yeah, I was about to say Wolfgang Puck sort of churned out a large percentage of what is now in the food industry there.
Yeah. So, and I learned a lot from him. I learned that, push away all your French ideas, keep your skills, but embrace the moment, embrace the new ideas. And, the kitchen was, Mexican, people from Sri Lanka, San Salvador, from everywhere. So you see different cooking technique. And it really opened my mind to what's going on, what's happening, And I think today, the French cooking scene is always overrated, overpriced. There is a big gap between the top restaurant and the small restaurant because it's all about economics. you know. And you know, I think for the dollar spend, you eat better in LA or in California. And in France, you know, I don't go anymore to restaurant because I've been always disappointed, and it's not my things anymore. And you know what I like about the States or Canada for that matter, it's the open space, the you know, people embrace the new things.
The thing that we've sort of seen with that, which is a bit similar between Australia and different parts of the States, is that willingness to sort of take the classic idea, to embrace it and make it something that's their own. And that's I mean, look, Australia, I mean, so far away from everywhere. Yet the food scene is vibrant. I mean, 25 years ago, I used to buy, I bought it for many years. I would buy Vogue Australia Entertainment because they had a great food section. And some of the restaurants display on it, I was like, oh my God, this is so crazy, so exciting, so new. And I remember that place, I mean, the name always stuck to my mind. I think it was in Sydney. It's called Meat Zitron. And, you know, you look at it and, you know, just the wording, the name, the logo. And I was like just mesmerized by the amount of creativity and people are very, you know, they're not afraid to do things. And that's what I like about food scenes. You know, you need to be in places where it inspires you. If it does not, then it becomes boring. And you know, so that's why when I moved to the States, I'm like, oh my God, you know, it's so, and people are less critical, I think. And if you make a mistake, it's quickly forgotten because you can do something new tomorrow. So I like this kind of thinking. So I was in LA for a couple of years. I live a little in Carmel, Monterey, which is a paradise. And then I moved to New York, and New York was really that's where my career took a big, you know, I mean, I was for 4 years, the best hotel with a great chef doing great pastries. And for 4 years, it was just crazy. You know, I mean, I will say it's like on the Bible, you know, ask and you should receive. And everything I will do, people will get excited. And, you know, I was in the right set of mind, the right city, the right age too. I mean, you cannot go in New York when you're 55 because doesn't quite work, Philly.
But I was 32, I think, when I moved there, and you know, it was just insane. I mean, I remember for an event, it was for the 100 years anniversary of Jell-O. So it was at the James Byrd Foundation event, and I did a homemade Jell-O. You know, you know, I used raspberry juice. Like a Jell-O, and all the French chefs that will walk by my station, they will make fun of me. But every single American who walked by just loved it because you can relate and connect to it. And that event got press in the New York Times. I mean, I remember Tim Zagat walked by and he says, "This is genius." You know, you're just embracing the. You know, I think it's important to embrace your surrounding and what you can gain from it. You know, there is you know. Pop culture is very important because it, you know, that's where we live every day. So it's important to embrace it. Is it right? Is it wrong? I let other people to decide, but you have to, you know, to embrace that spirit.
It's that issue of gatekeeping, like in food, sort of as you were saying. And the idea is that with a lot of the French, the problem that a lot of people from the outside have with traditional French food is that gatekeeping of this is the way it is done and this is the only way it can be done, and there is no flexibility in developing. You know, there are
you know, what saved a little. I mean, France saw it with Spain. I mean, I grew up in France where Spain was a poor country in Europe. And then in late 80s and early 90s, the food scene in Spain just picked up, and because the economy really, you know, went on fire. There was a lot of money invested. I mean, you need a good economy to sustain great restaurants. There is no secret about it, you know. And then the food scene in France kind of died slowly, you know, because the French were looking at it, you know, it's just fancy, and you know, but people will not travel to Europe. Will only travel to Europe to go to Spain because that was the excitement, that's the innovation. You know. And I remember going to Paris and spending a lot of money, and I find it extremely boring. And I'm like, you know, I'm not going to go back. What saved French cooking is really the skills, the dedication. I mean, people are a bit crazy sometimes, and the quality of the product as well. I mean, you know, there is farmers who grow, who, you know, you know. So if you take a great product with good skills, you can, you know, but I think you can have great food all over the world. In Africa, 100%. South America, Australia, it just takes, local product, skills, and, you need money. You need, people say, oh, New York, there is so many great, well, there is so much money to spend.
When the amount are prepared to pay for your product at that level, you can create consistently great product.
And, restaurants are very expensive investment with a very small margin of profit and a high failure rate. So, it's, so for me, it's always been exciting. I moved to Canada 13, maybe 14 years ago. No regret. My son lives here, and I could go back to the States because I became a US citizen. So it's easy for me to go back and forth to do things. So I always have that door open. But, for me, I was like, I'm a bit older now. I'm not anymore 30. I wanted to find the right balance too. And Vancouver, it's a great city, but, people in Vancouver want to believe they are like San Francisco or New York. It's not. It's a great town.
Significantly colder for a start.
There is a lot of great restaurants, but there is not the amount of money to sustain a lot of restaurants. So for independent restaurant in Vancouver, more than ever now, it's very difficult.
Absolutely.
Even in good time, it's very difficult.
I mean, it's kind of, from my understanding was that, again, if, Toronto and Montreal sort of are the hubs if you want.
Yeah, Toronto, I used to go to Toronto 30 years ago, and it was maybe 5 restaurants. Now you go, and every month there is something new, again, because there is so much wealth in Toronto that can sustain those restaurants. Montreal, it's minus 40 outside, people go to restaurants. So there is this food culture that's so ingrained. I remember going to Montreal one day, it was like minus 40, and everywhere else on earth, nobody goes out. And you go to Montreal, people are out like it's a normal day,
This is beautiful. So, al fresco.
It's far too balmy.
Yeah.
That's sensational. And obviously then you've put a lot of this too into the Baking with Bruno book that you put out.
So, it's a journey. It's, like a lot of chefs, everybody wants to do a cookbook. And when I got lucky, I got a great contract for 3 cookbooks with my publisher. And when I sit down, I'm like, it's easy to say I want to do a cookbook, but to come up with an idea, it's a bit more difficult.
Yes.
And we wanted to keep it simple. We wanted to keep it, not about me in one hand, but about how easy for people to be. The book had to be accessible right away. So, there is a lot of cookbooks, a lot of baking books who are very technical.
Yes.
And, I didn't want that to be. I wanted to be simple. People could relate to it with good recipe that you can do at home without, spending a lot of money. So, I always say it's not for the elite. It's for the people just to have a good time. The book is priced properly, so you can get it for, I think, 30 Canadian. And I didn't want it to be like an ego workshop. It's all about me. It is about me somehow, but my experience. But recipe has to be excited, and I didn't want it to be French recipe only. So some of the recipe, like there is one, it's a candy cane crème brûlée. Cotton candy crème brûlée.
Oh, wow.
So I use, instead of sugar, I use cotton candy. So that crème brûlée, it's like going to the fair. I do a cheesecake with candy cane for the holidays. So, it's not, it's strict in a way with recipes because it's French. But the spirit, it's a lot of, from my journey from the last 30 years in North America.
It's a lot like, what you're sort of saying there is a lot like, one of my favorite Billy Connolly stories about his favorite cookbook as a child, which was the difference between accessibility and non. And they used to have in the Scottish tenement buildings, his family had Lady Maclean's cookbook, which featured the phrase, it was a recipe for this meal. It's like, just the perfect thing to do with that leftover venison. And he's like, it's not accessible. He's like, we're in a Scottish tenement building. Who's got leftover venison out the back?
And you have to think about it. I live in Vancouver. A lot of people live in major cities. So it's easy access to great food. But once you leave this major center, it's not easy to find, even to have a nice dinner, to have access to good, healthy food. So I always say that book has to be, any bakers anywhere need to be able to do this recipe with ease. So there is no secret ingredient, there is no special equipment. If you don't have it, you can still bake it that way. I give a lot of tips. If you don't have that flavor, use cinnamon, it's fine. Because, that book, has to be, I didn't want the first book to be only for the elite.
Yeah.
And then your non only to cook for the elite. I kind of, I always remember, like, we cook food like there is no end, but I always remember there is a lot of people who are starving, and you don't need to go far away. I mean, Vancouver, we have the food bank who are overwhelmed with demand. A lot of kids go to school with no food. So I always keep this in mind. I mean, food is great, it can be fun, but we need to remain very respectful toward it, because not everybody can have access to food.
Absolutely. There's a lot of privilege that comes with, food culture. I mean, when you get to the high end levels, it's an artistic scene, it's, but you need to have that kind of privilege to be able to delve into that. So the fact that your book is, you're mindful of the people, and it can happen to all of us. Food security is very, tenuous, no matter where you are.
The last few months, we've learned that everything we've been taking for granted can be, wiped away very quickly. So, it's a difficult time for many people, for a lot of people, the last 6 months now almost. And we always have to keep in mind, we don't know what tomorrow can be made of. So let's be grateful with what we have. Baking is good because baking is about sharing. So, so I love cooking. Through my career, I cooked, I did baking, chocolate. The cooking is different. Cooking, it's about survival. At the core, cooking, it's harvesting, hunting, fishing, really to feed the family. And you go to get a fish because you're starving. So that's the basic of cooking. Baking is different. I mean, you don't cook a cake because you don't bake a cake because you're starving. No. It's about sharing and offering. So it's all about a certain entertainment where you give it to your friends, your family. You bring muffins to school, to the hospital. So it's a bit different approach. And during this difficult time, baking just have a huge surge. I mean, in Canada, we couldn't find flour anymore.
No, we couldn't find flour either. I actually saw that Robin Hood in Canada were printing just white bags, going, don't panic, it's still our flour. We just can't print the bags in time.
And then I was looking, somebody was telling me, he said, why don't you do bread and post on Instagram? I said, I can't. Did you see so many beautiful loaves? I was starting to be intimidated. I'm like, anybody was making great bread. So I'm like, no way, I'm not going to show anything I can do.
The upcoming season might be the first time where Bruno walks in and goes, so what have you done? Because I really want to see something. I've got no idea. Give me something.
So it shows. And that people, I think baking, for the last 3 years now, I'm on the show. I always say I'm so grateful. I'm so happy. I'm very lucky. It's the best job in Canada for a chef, because you judge, but you're not mean in your judging. That's specific about the show. But for me, I have so many people reach out to me through social media. And 99% of the comments are fantastic. There is a few troll, of course, because people, some people have nothing else to do. Yeah. But, people told me, like this lady was telling me, she has a son, which is my son's age, 13 years old. Yeah. And, you will spend this whole day playing video games. Yeah. And when this happens, you lose connection, with the family. And then she said one day he saw an episode of the show. And then he told his mom, I want to start to bake. So now they spend their weekend baking together. And she's like, this is so fantastic because I thought that will never happen. And, we, as human beings, we crave connections.
Yeah.
And, I remember when I grew up, the kitchen was a family space. And then the living room became family space because of the TV. But even now, nobody watches TV. People are just looking at their own device. Yeah. So that's even more fragmented. So I always say, kitchen, that's where you can bring back people together. I think the show has done well in Canada because it brings people together. It's not divisive. It's really bring family and non-stop. I get people stop me on the street, even more now because the show is on Netflix in Canada.
Yeah.
So usually I take a little break when I go out. Now late. Now people people stop me, and the comments are so positive, are so encouraging, and I feel like it's a bit sometimes uncomfortable because I'm just judging a cake, and it's quite easy and it's
not
enjoyable, but people look at it in a different way. People thanks me for it, and I'm like, I'm very humbled by the whole experience.
But as you said as well, and it's something that always sums up for us, always the ethos of all the versions of Bake Off around the world, is that idea of connection. Bake Off as a concept of a show and the way it's always implemented is about that connection with others.
And all the bakers, I mean, they have their own chat room. I think season 1, 2, and 3, they all mix together, they share ideas, they get together. And on set, there is pressure. There is, it's a competition. And I think the biggest pressure, it's nobody wants to go home on the first episode.
No, we've always suggested, by the way, we've put this to now producers in Canada and Australia. We've often suggested a fake first contestant. Just so you don't have to send, like, maybe just a grip who's just hanging around the set and you're like, here, you pretend it's always been your dream and just get out in the first week so the bakers get 2 weeks.
but we speak to them because we have to be very respectful to the bakers. They come, they spend a lot of time, energy, stress, and there is no prize besides just a little platter. So we are very respectful. And I told them, I said, look, it does not matter if you win or if you lose. It does not matter if you go home the first week. That's not very important. Look at the bigger picture. You are given a very specific amount of space and time that's so unique. Just embrace it, and if you lose, doesn't matter. I told them, you will come out from it a better baker, a better person. You're going to make great friends. And then we go into the final. Sure, there is always people who are disappointed, but often, and you can look at other shows, the British, the Australian, you don't need to win to do well. Sometimes the third, the fourth, or the fifth baker actually can come out with great, success. So, it's what you make of it. It's what you gain from it. It's what you learn from it. And a lot of them do some extra activities after the show. I mean, there is Anne Murray from season 2.
Oh, we love Anne Murray.
She does, remember she was asking me, what should I do? I say, there is a lot of kids with disability who love to bake. And I used to teach at one point, and I have a student who was paralyzed from one arm, but she wanted to bake. So I developed technique how to use a rolling pin with one hand is very hard. But I teach her how to do it. You put your arms on the top of the rolling pin and you use your whole body, and she was able to roll, to make tarts. So I told Anne Murray, I say maybe, and now Anne Murray teaches in a hospital in Toronto. So everybody can gain something from it. There is no loser. There is only winners in my eyes.
And one of the other things that we've seen, we're talking about the connection. We've seen the connection between the bakers from the seasons in Canada and the bakers from the seasons in Australia, who are now all sort of connecting with each other as well. And Robert from Australian worked with you, and Anne-Marie on the flowers and things like that to make the delicate flowers. It's that big sort of general community where they can all share ideas and you get to see what people have been doing. And things like, Jasmine and all the stuff she's doing at the moment with Black Lives Matter and all of that sort of fundraising as well. Yeah. It's just incredible to watch this community develop off the back of this show. It's
the only country who was never able so far to create, it's the US.
Yep, the US and South Africa.
South Africa, I've never seen this.
No, we saw one episode of South Africa, and it was people that had clearly not actually been in the kitchen before.
Yeah, because even the French version, is quite funny. It's good. Knowing the French with their patisserie are so serious about it. When the first time I see season 1, I was like, that's not going to go well. No, I think people embrace that good nature.
Yeah.
And if the French can do it, I don't know if you've seen any French version.
I've seen bits and pieces of France and Italy as well. I've seen both of those.
But the US, I don't know. It's like, I think they're now in their 4th version or 5th version.
I think it's the competition, the nature of the TV shows in America, which is based on winning and competition. And I think that's so ingrained in the market that
but
they just can't get around the idea that this is fun.
Yeah, it's shown on PBS. So usually the viewers from PBS are a bit more mild, more educated. But it's, even there, it's not picking up the same way. So yeah, a lot to learn. But yeah, for me, it's been an amazing 3 years. We're going into the 4th season, so I'll be going to Toronto in a few weeks to start to shoot. And yeah, it's sometimes I wake up, I'm like, I cannot believe it's real. I mean, the whole story, when they call me, I think at the beginning I was like, no, I'm not interested. I don't know. And then they say, why don't you come to Toronto? And we talked, and I flew to Toronto, and I showed up for the auditioning, and there is like 30 people for the job. And I look around, I'm like, what a fucking waste of time. They're never gonna pick me because there was people like blue eyes, 6'2", tattoos, there was hipsters. I mean, I'm like, I told myself, I've got no chance, with my double chin and my thick accent, it's not gonna work. But it happens, and when they call me and say, we want you on the show, I just like, I have to go out, and I couldn't speak. I was very emotional, and because you was obviously I'm a big fan of Paul Hollywood and what he's done on the show.
Yeah,
and I'm like, I cannot believe I'm like a step behind him, a few seasons behind.
Yeah,
and season 1 was, for me was very, we were thrown in very quick.
Yeah,
yes.
From the moment I got the call, I think it was within a month. So I have no training, no. And like, you watch Shit Creek, and a month later you're sitting next to Dan. And I was like frozen. I didn't know what to say. And then, it was very hot. Summer in Toronto is not the best time to be in Toronto.
It's the one thing that everyone who's ever been on the show has ever said to us is the heat inside, as we call it, the pavilion, because it's different to the tent. But the heat inside there, they said you would not expect it, but it's ridiculous.
I mean, you feel for the bakers, and sometimes I'm like, I don't even know how they manage to do it, because we are not in a tent all the time because of the way it works, But like for the technical, so we don't know who did what, and we are like, it's no way it's gonna pull it, it's too hot. Then you show up in a tent, and it's right there. They're all sweating and exhausted. Some are fainting or very close to faint. I'm like, those guys nailed it, and but the season 1 was, discovery for me. A bit frustrated in a way that I felt I was repeating myself all the time. I couldn't come up with a good narrative. And when you're in front of the camera, your tendency is to speak very fast, and you want to fill up the space, which is not very good because, it doesn't make good TV. So for season 2, what I did some training. I had a coach who said, he gave me a piece of English from a book or a magazine. He said, could you underline all the TH? So I did. He said, now you cannot pronounce, because TH is not a French sound. No. So on season 1, I had a line to say, who are those? And I couldn't say it. So it was more like, who's this? And I was so frustrated because I knew I couldn't, nailed it, and people were laughing and all the time, who's this? So my coach is like, can you underline all the TH? So I did. And I look at the page, and oh my God, there is a lot of TH in the English language. Now you understand, if you cannot pronounce your properly, nobody understands you.
Did you wander around a few days just going,
yeah, who are those, other than that? So I did, and that kind of freed me not to worry about my speech, and being able to enjoy the moment, to enjoy the space, and to be able to come up with better narrative about how I felt. And also I learned to pause and wait, and that's okay.
Yeah.
So because the whole television, is such an amazing space to work. It's creative. You're surrounded by, I always call them the crazies, but those people are like, it's a creative space that's very nurturing and very exciting. And I love being around it.
So I have to talk about the bakes, and in particular the technicals. Now I have to ask the first question.
Because you're talking about the heat, and I wonder if this could be it.
So the first question I have to ask is, what is the most memorable technical, and why is it creme caramel? I love that creme caramel challenge so much, and your reaction walking back in, just guys, what the hell?
I think the most difficult for the technical is to, mostly on the first few episodes, you have a lot to try.
Yeah.
And then you have a lot to remember. And you want to be sure because you're in front of the baker and you don't have time. The other judging, you have time to prepare yourself. On a technical, we don't know. So you go and you have to judge. So you want to be sure first you judge properly and you word your comments that are constructive, and you don't want to be there, it's not good, it tastes good. It has to be more than that. So, and everybody's looking at you. The baker look at you. And that's the hardest part when you have 10 of them.
Yeah.
And then you want to, how do you say? As a chef, sometimes you take things for granted. Yep. So like a crème caramel, I look at it like, it's a crème caramel. But you have to reverse. For the bakers, it wasn't just, it's a crème caramel. For them, it was like climbing the Everest. So I would say probably the crème caramel was the most challenging to judge, because some of them we had a few disasters.
You had soup.
Yeah, we had a soup, one or two soups, undercooked. I think one of the technical, I think it was maybe season 1, was too much salt.
Yes.
And but 90% of the time, I have to give credit to all the bakers. They nail it. The recipe are never complete. Some of them, like season 2, we have the Japanese mochi.
Yeah.
Oh, yum.
One of Kristie's.
And I told myself, nobody's going to make it. They're all going to fail, because I learned how to make mochi, and it's time consuming. It's messy. If you don't know how to do it, it can be very frustrating. And I'm like, there is no way. I say maybe 1 or 2, but no way. So we were expecting disaster. Then we show up. I'm like, oh God, those guys know how to bake. You're like, no, they nail it. So sometimes bakers can surprise you.
Yeah.
The crème brûlée, on the other hand, I'm like, we were a bit concerned for the timing. I'm like, but if they do the right steps, they're gonna make it. So I felt it would be easy testing until we show up, and I'm like, oh my God.
I have to say, whenever I talk to any bakers from that series, I bring it up as my way of sort of poking and prodding a little bit. It's like, maybe we can have crème caramel. It's like poke.
It's what we do in Australia. Just take the piss.
But it's one of the, as you sort of alluded to there, it's that skill and quality of those bakers that in all 3 seasons that we've seen so far has been
baking, making pastry, it's chemistry. So first, the recipe is going to work. Yes, cooking, it's easy. You can fix the sauce. You can fix, unless you burn it. Cooking, it's easy fix. Baking, if you messed up, I do tell the bakers, if it's not, because sometimes bakers have a tendency to apologize. Oh, I'm so sorry. It's like, before we shoot, I say, look, if it's not the way you want it to be, you don't need to tell me you failed. Just spin the story.
Yeah. Look, it's a good attempt. Look, I've almost,
Yes.
Actually, I think Judy, she had
everything in the first 5 challenges.
Yeah, she was like, I'm so sorry. I was like, stop. Don't just spin that story, tell me something else, and I will believe you, because I don't know what happens.
Didn't need jam.
The Battenberg didn't need jam, and as for my maple cupcakes, they didn't need maple. Look, it was an idea.
It was the inspiration of maple.
It was the whimsy that is Jude, which we absolutely.
But we look at it with the other judge, and we like for the technical, so we have no access to the tent. We don't know anything.
Yep.
People ask me, I'm like, we walk out from the tent.
Yeah.
And I don't know who makes what, and we are put in a trailer, so we cannot see even the back cameras, the screen. We see nothing. So when we arrive, and I got to say, it's 24 technical under our belt. No, 25, because last year we have an extra episode. 24 were like, the crème caramel was probably the most challenging, but people make it, the staff. Sometimes, when we go over the programming stuff I never heard about, never baked myself. So I have to trained to understand. So we do try the recipe ourselves just to test it and see what it takes, how it feels, so we can speak about it. We do a lot of research for anything. We do a lot of research just to be able to have an insight from it. You know, like I remember the Battenberg cake on season 1. So, you know, I can bet, I can put my life savings that there is no baker in France who's made a Battenberg.
No, it's not a very French cake.
No. And if you try to do it, you'll probably be fired or sent to a therapy, because we don't do that kind of cake. So I have to learn how to make it at home, roll it. And I'm like, that's technical. That's so hard. I mean, like, why even bother to make a cake like this? You know? But so like this, when I go into testing, I understand what it took to do it. So I'm a bit more, you know, I think the biggest challenge as a judge is to put aside all your bias you can have that builds over time, and be very fair and be very clean in your comments. You know, you don't want to say all the time it's good or it's bad. You want to, you want to get your feelings, the texture, but you want to, you know, we always try to give, you know, one bad comment, two positive, because at the end, you know, everything is edible. You know, if it's a bit more denser or undercooked or overcooked, you know, there is a few, then it's personal choice. Like personally, I don't like chocolate mousse and fresh raspberry. I don't think it's a great combination. I don't do it, but I understand that a lot of people love that combination. So when I judge it, I'm not going to put my own personal taste into it. You know, I'm going to look if the mousse is done properly, or the raspberry, you know, is there enough, not enough. So that's where, as a judge, it's more difficult to be, you know, very fair. Because, you know, you got to be very, very respectful for the effort of the baker. Every single baker, we think, you know, thank you for coming. You're putting a lot of effort into it, a lot of time, energy. And we always are extremely, you know, respectful and grateful they took the time to come, because if there is no bakers, there is no show.
No. And it's the diversity in that that you see in that show, and backgrounds and skill levels, backgrounds, but also cultural backgrounds, you know, all of the different parts of the spectrum of, you know, Earth, really, in this one sort of microcosm of a show, that you get to see such a great, like, again, you had like Jodie, for example, in season 3 with, you know, her native history and her backgrounds. And you've had people from like this wide range of diverse backgrounds. So
I get excited when people bring flavor that I never tried. So like Vandana on season 1, always baked stuff like I never had before. And for me, it's like, wow, you know, it's so refreshing. You know, on my day-to-day, I always say, you know, diversity is great. Immigrants are great. It makes your life richer. Embrace it. So the show does it in many ways, because it brings to the table, you know, I can feel and touch stuff I've never seen before, and I enrich myself. I mean, look at Canadian cooking. You know, people say, oh, it's you know, poutine and, you know, maple syrup. I'm like, no, we got some of the best Asian food in the world in Richmond, not too far from Vancouver. We got amazing Thai chef. You know, we got First Nation cooking that's starting to finally to get their own traction and own recognition. So it's a very rich culinary culture that's finally being embraced by people. But I think only because we have a lot of immigrants coming from all over who bring something to the table, you know. And you know, look, Indian cooking, you know, it's a very difficult, you know, there is, all the culture cooking are different, but there is always a connecting point. So, you know, you can take French food and Indian food. It's so different because Indian food is so complex, so rich, so varied. But there is one common element, it's butter.
It's always butter.
You know, always. French, you know, so when you know this, you know that butter can carry those flavor and mix. And Vandana was very good at it. You know, she made some of the cakes bringing flavor and using a lot of butter. And she understood, you know, I always say I love butter because it brings flavor that not like no other fat. You know, olive oil, I cook with it. I love olive oil, but that support for flavor, only butter can do it. Lard doesn't do it. Shortening, definitely not, you know. So, And you know, and the show, you know, like the diversity of the bakers, what they bring to the table, you know, everybody has a story.
Yeah.
All of us have a story, and I say, you know, speak about it. You can express it through baking, through your family, through your friends, through, you know, I think everybody on this planet is very important, and baking can be a language of translation for many things, you know.
Well, there's baking like across the world. Like in Australia, we've got the oldest bakers on earth. Apparently, our Indigenous peoples invented baking. So you know, Australia, the bakers, you know,
baker's paradise. But that's the thing. It's using those native ingredients in a way that is quite complex. And
I mean, look, Australia. I mean, you guys are so far away from everywhere. Yet you were able to develop your own identity about food. You were able, I mean, the food scene in Sydney, the wines. So I say, no matter where you are, no matter what's your background, there is always a way to express your culture through food. And that's the magic of it.
The thing is that is that being, I mean, the big question is all that sort of diversity being reflected sort of within kitchens and sort of that broader.
It's better than it used to.
Yeah.
And I'm ashamed to say, you know, I'm ashamed to say that I'm part of a system in kitchen because, you know, I do the TV show, but I still run restaurants, and I'm working on a new project in Richmond for a new hotel restaurant, and I work in many restaurants. It's not a kind world for people who are not white bro. So I call it the white bro, non-diversified. It's not a very welcoming space for women. It's not a welcoming space for the LGBTQ community. For the immigrants, it's a bit better, but you know, it's not easy in Vancouver. So you can imagine in smaller cities, in other space. I got lucky because in '94, when I was in New York, my chef was a woman.
Oh, wow.
Was a very strong-minded woman, and I worked with her for 4 years. So I understood, and I saw what she has to go through to get respected. You know, she was being abused by the customer, by leadership on the top, by people from below. And I see what she had to do to prove her worth. And, you know, I admire her to be able to succeed. And I have, you know, African-American friends as chef, was what they have to do to succeed. They have to work 10 times harder than average Joe. You know, if you declare yourself being a gay person in the kitchen, it's dangerous for that person. They can be beat up. They can be, and it's not 40, 30, 50 years ago. It's happening often. You know, so it's not a welcoming space for a lot of non-white male. And you know, it's a bit better. There is cluster of cooking communities that are more inclusive. But you know, I always suggest to people, if you want a great restaurant with great food, you need to be diversified in your kitchen. That strength, that brings a lot of energy. My new project, when I spoke to ownership, you know, I told them I want an all-inclusive kitchen that welcomes everybody. When I do my hiring process, there is, because you know, in a hotel there is so many layers of management, and I say I want total freedom to hire the people I want. If I have somebody above me who start to say, you know, I want my kitchen to be as diversified, because for me it's strength, it's diversity, it's the way success is measured today, is how diversified you are. And if a chef doesn't understand this, then you're 20 years behind. So
it's like a how can I put it, on the microcosm of, you know, what you were talking about when you left France, you know, that kind of arrogance and elitism about only one way.
You know, and I can see that arrogant in a lot of restaurants. I mean, I can tell you so many times, you know, and people don't want to change it. People want to see what they want to see in a restaurant. Yeah, it's a bit tough, you know, it's hardcore, and it's been glorified for other chefs. But let's not forget, there is a lot of sexual and physical abuse in restaurants today, everywhere. And how do you stop it? You know, and you know, I won't give names because people have a tendency to sue you. But you know, one of the best restaurants in France have 3 Michelin star for many years, for a long time, and still I believe they have black people as doorman dressed like little monkeys. Now you can do your risk, and everybody thinks it's normal. I look at it, I'm like shocked. that they won't hire a white guy to be a doorman. There's still a black guy with a little red hat, like, the circus monkey when they dress. Exactly the same for the last 50 years. When I mention it, people say, oh, but that chef did so much. It's like, doesn't matter. If you're a racist and a bigot, you're still a racist and a bigot.
Yeah.
And in France, there is a lot of kitchen like this. In the US, I mean, it's how do you change it? How I lose an example. When I post anything on Instagram, baking related, my number of followers increase.
Yep.
When I post anything about racism or bigotry, I lose a lot of followers. And it's funny, and it shows you that people are very uncomfortable with it. Yeah. So I'm not losing 1,000, but I can track my numbers. And every day, like my last post was about racism, and I lost more than I gained that day. So that shows you, there is more to do. There is more, my concern with Black Lives Movement is I'm afraid it's going to die until somebody gets hurt again.
Yeah.
There is a lot of hypocrisy, like suddenly people became anti-racist. And I'm like, let's do it every day, every minute, everything you do, sometimes it's uncomfortable process or talk, it's not easy. I've done bad things when I was young in kitchen. I was probably verbally abusive to a lot of people, and I recognize it. I hurt a lot of people when I was in my 30s in kitchen. I did not know better because that's the way I was raised in kitchen. But I think through learning, you can become better and you can make people's life around you way better. Yep. You can inspire them. And, but it's not a kind space for a lot of people. And it's very unfortunate because I think everybody deserves to have a job that pays well. I mean, the good things about cooking, I always say, it's probably the last area where with no diploma, with nothing, you can do very well.
Yeah.
Every other job, you need to do 2 years, 4 years of education. Cooking, I mean, I know a lot of chefs talented who've never been to cooking school.
Yeah.
And it's probably the last area where you can become somebody. I mean, I left school when I was 15. I'm a product of foster care, so I have no privilege when I grew up. But, does everybody can succeed like me? No, but there is possibilities. And I say everybody deserves that possibility, no matter if you're African-American, if you're Asian, if you're a woman, if you're gay, if you're transgender, you all have the right to that success. But in kitchen world, there is a lot of hurdle if you're not a white guy to succeed.
Absolutely. And it's so important for allies like us to keep, like myself and my husband, like Chris here, we're consumers, so we can choose where we spend our money. And you're using your privilege to be able to choose who you hire to give, a platform for people from diverse backgrounds to get in the door. And it's about not doing it perfectly, but just to keep doing it as imperfectly as
to cross over that line, the line between wrong and right. You don't need to do a lot. Just cross that line into the right direction, and everything will follow. If no chef talked about the abuse in kitchen, it's not going to change.
Absolutely.
It takes one person to start to say, look, this is not right. People working 14 hours. You hear story people work 14 hours. That's abuse to me.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Because you don't need to do this to do a great product.
No.
I mean, I work 10 hours a day maximum, and I can do great food, and my cooks work well under 10 hours. 14, it's social abuse.
Yeah.
You're going to be kept with underpaid. I mean, you hear stories like in London, in England, people cannot pay their rents. In Vancouver, the same, people working 12, 13, 14 hours, no overtime, 6 days a week. Because I know what it is. I went through this. I work in kitchens where I was told, if you want to work here, it's 10 a.m. to close. You're welcome. You don't like it, you don't need to come.
Which is exploiting. Yeah, that's expensive.
Yeah. And there is still a lot of places like this, and it's very unfortunate.
And that's where it's important for things like, again, with Canadian Bake Off, is the idea of that modeling of that positivity and that modeling of that positive message.
Yeah, and I use my little moment of fame or, my bigger space to, my bigger stage to be able to, speak up. I don't want to, people say, you want to talk about your book on the show? I say, yeah, but can we talk about other stuff too? That's very important. I want to try to, because, you're on TV, you're famous, but let's not forget, the day I'm not on TV, I will be quickly forgotten. That's the way it works. You know, I live in LA for 4 years, so I have a lot of friends who are actors. so I know it works, you know. But I told myself, for the moment I have a little stage to speak up, let's do it, you know, for my son. You know, I have a 13-year-old son. You know, he sees the world a bit differently. He sees it more positively. His friends from all walk of life, you know, he understands how important inclusion is. So, you know, kids or new generation have a fresh pair of eyes to the world. Yeah. And I want to maintain that. I want to encourage him to say, you know, his friends are from all over, Philippines, Chinese, Turkish, and that's his world. And, you know, when he goes to France, he told me, he said, Dad, it's weird here. I can feel it. It's not, it's very segregated socially in France. You know, last night I was listening to a writer from Mali who studied in France, and you know, she was told all the time, you know, if you stay in France, you have to change your name. Your kids need to have a French name. You need to eat like the local, and you know, if you don't do this, you're accused of sectarian. And she said it's funny because I moved back to Bamako in Mali, and there is a huge French community, and she said that French community, they don't buy local food. They eat their cheese and they have the cheese flown over. They don't name their kids African names. They give them, and they don't dress like the local. So, you know, we always have to look from the other perspective. I think it's very important. You know, I'm an immigrant. I'm no different from an immigrant from Africa or from Asia. I'm an immigrant. And, you know, you have to adapt to the surrounding, but, you know, you have to respect the others. You have to be, and always look at the other point of view. I think it helps you understand.
And it's where food's brilliant in terms of that ability to be able to use food to sort of be the melting pot and be introduction to cultures that people might not naturally want to sort of be involved with when they're a bit standoffish or have that background there.
But I'm also really, you know, intrigued and like my passion is decolonization, like to see, you know, like we live on Darawal land, on the traditional, like that's the traditional land that we live on. And I'm always, you know, wanting to see the people who are the traditional custodians of this area to share their culture with, you know, and to know, you know, our true history.
You know, so, you know, I'm a bit familiar with Australia and the Aboriginal. When I moved to Canada, I did not know much. You know, but I knew that being here for 10 years now, I understand the trauma that First Nation went through it. Absolutely. And I have a lot of Canadian friends, like, they don't get it. And I'm like, you know, look at change your role. Put yourself, like for me, I'm French born. We speak French at home. You imagine tomorrow if the government passed a policy that said kids from French family cannot stay in their families. They have to be sent to schools that teach them proper English. And they're knowing that your son's going to be abused sexually and physically. And as a parent, you imagine the trauma you go through. And I'm like, you know, because, you know, we think, you know, and that policy was just stopped maybe 25 years ago in Canada. So you have a couple of generations that went through that trauma. And I'm like, understand, you know, when you have that trauma, you cannot create, you know, because you have so much pain. How can you, you know, food's about joy.
Yes.
So, you know, you need to find, you know, like China and food, you know, Chinese cooking is very rich and complex and, you know, but because of 40 years of communism, for a long time in China was not access to great food, only the last 15 years. So of course, China lost a lot of, you know, opportunity. And what you have today, you know, it's people will spend $100 in French food, but will not spend $100 on Chinese food. People expect Chinese food to be cheap. And there is an expectation that Chinese food is cheap and French food is expensive. And I'm like, that's not right.
No.
You know, Chinese food can be $100 per person. Why not? Because there is a lot of culture behind. It's very complex, very rich. But there is this set of mind that there is nothing, you know, Chinese food is cheap. And this is so wrong. Same with, you know, First Nation cooking. You know, First Nation, they live off the land. You know, the salmon, the berries, the caribou, the meat, the maple syrup. It's all, you know, it's right there. It's under your arm. You can reach it. I mean, we have so much salmon here. It's crazy. But they never had that opportunity to explore it, to promote it. The last few years is starting to catch up. There is a lot of young, talented First Nation chefs, but a lot of people are reticent to go eat there.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, to open a restaurant, it's expensive. You know, it's a high risk investment, and it's not easy to find an investor who wants to back you up. And it goes back to, you know, white male chef have access to funding to start the restaurant.
Yeah.
Woman chef of colors, of minorities have a very hard time to find money to start restaurants. First Nation the same. So you know, it's about the opportunity. If you don't let the First Nation cook come to your kitchen to learn with you, how can you open in a restaurant in 10 years? We're going to be the same circle where there is no creativity. So that's why I say inclusive kitchen create a lot of dynamic, and it's a future. We need to bring people from all over, all walk of life to succeed today.
And one of the other areas, along sort of talking about the idea of minorities and all this sort of inclusiveness within the kitchen, one of the other things that I'm really pleased that you've used your platform for as well is the work you've sort of done with Anxiety Canada and Anxiety BC in particular. I found a lot of that stuff actually when I was, obviously through COVID, which I think a lot of people have seen a very rapid increase in levels of anxiety, you know, myself included. And it's been...
So, you know, for me, it's very linked to my career. So people ask me, people know me in New York, where I was one of the best pastry chefs in New York. I was all over the magazine, and then I disappeared. And people always like, what happened to you? And for a long time, I didn't want to talk about it because I was very ashamed of what happens. You know, I experienced trauma when I was a child. And in New York, I started to have panic attack, anxiety attack, and I couldn't function.
Yep.
I couldn't hold a job. I went bankrupt personally. You know, I couldn't keep a job. I couldn't go to a restaurant. I couldn't get on a plane. I mean, I had a panic attack on the flight. You know, I have to go to the bathroom to bite my finger almost to bleed because I was freaking out. And, you know, that's not a place where you want to freak out.
No, not really.
And couldn't get a job. If I had a job, I couldn't deal. I was, you know, procrastinating. Couldn't react to. So my career took a dive, like, you know, and it's a dive for income, for opportunities, for everything. Yep. And I went bankrupt. You know, I was borderline, almost going on the street. I have no more money. Yeah. And, you know, then at one point I decided to look for help. I wasted 8 years of my life. And people, you know, look at me and say, oh, you're on TV, and how can you do all those things when you have so much problem? I'm like, well, I do it. It just takes me 3 times the energy to do it. Yes. You know, takes me a lot of work to succeed. And I always say, you know, what if I had looked at help 20 years ago? You know, what if I have this support, you know, 25 years ago? Where could my life have been? So I always felt like, and with my therapist, I didn't want any medication. I'm like, you know, I'd rather suffer with nothing, but I won't be myself. I don't, you know. So I have a great therapist, and you know, and I told her, you know, I want to gain back what I deserve. I want my life back. I want to live my life. I have a young boy. Is my life now. I don't want to miss any opportunity. I don't want to spend more days sitting on a chair doing nothing. Or, you know, I want that energy again. And it took me a couple of years. I started to speak up about it because the Vancouver Sun, the local newspaper, did a story about me. And, you know, they approached me in the beginning, and I'm like, I don't know, you know, nobody wants to speak about their own problem. And definitely, as a man, no man wants to say, you know, I struggle with mental health because, you know, you're taking away their machismo. Yeah. And they say, you know, we're doing a series about human condition. Would be great if you will, you know. So, you know, from one small interview became like 6 hours call with that journalist. And they did a 2-page, I think, on the Vancouver Sun. I was slightly overwhelmed because people came to me. People reached out to me asking for help. And I was like, I can't. I can always offer you my testimony, but I'm not a messiah. I'm not a therapist. I know there is a solution. It's not easy and it's quite expensive. But, you know, Anxiety Canada approached me and said, could you, you know, since now you speak up, could you come? So, you know, we do fundraising, we do speech, we do a lot of small videos. I did 2 speech for a fundraising for Coast Mental Health in Vancouver to raise funds. In Canada, it's very underfunded. I think Australia and England does a great job. We don't do here a great job. That's why we have a high rate of people on the street. Any given time in Vancouver, there was about 500 kids living on the street. That was shocking news to me when I heard about it, when we were working with the social service about, I say maybe 10, but when I heard 500, I'm like, yeah, it's 500 kids who has no support, to live on the streets. And, so that opens the door to abuse, sexual, drug abuse, physical abuse, it's right there. So, if you don't have a strong support for mental health, it's a disaster. Vancouver loves to say and to brag, we are always rated one of the best cities in the world, and I'm so upset when I hear this. So on the news, local news, brag about it. Vancouver, number 2. And I'm so upset because, you take a walk on the downtown east side, it's so sad. We still treat people on the street as criminal. We still treat people with a mental disability as criminals in Canada. And that creates a ton of problem, and it's so unfair. I think Australia does way better. England does better, but Canada, we have a long way to go. So that's why I don't mind to speak up. I don't mind to be to say, look, if you have a problem, it's normal. We all go through this, and we have a high problem of overdose in Vancouver, or in Canada for that, with fentanyl. And this year I think we are on target to beat all the records, and it's what we're going to do. I have a young boy. It's my fear that he touched drugs, and and it's not a priority. It's not, I think we're going to hit 2,000 people dead in Vancouver, and still not a priority. It's, So a lot of things to do still. It's.
Absolutely. I live with an anxiety disorder as well, and
okay, so
what you've described, I'm like, yeah, that was my career too. I had this period of time where, and I'm in the care industry, so it happens to everyone, and the symptoms or the signs and symptoms that you see on the outset are that same. Everything comes in jeopardy when and you don't think it's you think it's you, and because we don't talk about it, we don't normalize it. I think you think, oh, I'm the deficient one, when really it's just another illness that just needs.
I still have, you never get rid of the panic attack. Nope. It always crawls back. It's how you manage it.
Absolutely.
I always say, on a show, often, it's not a full-blown panic attack, but I have often borderline panic attack, but I know how to manage it today. Absolutely. And when I say that to people, they say, how can you do the show? I say, I'm not the only one. It's, the difference, I don't do drugs to, to alleviate my challenges. But, it's always around. It's how you manage, how you control it. And
exactly.
So I say, you can do it. We all have that power. We all have that gift to succeed in life, or to make your life meaningful. Success, it's very vague. But I say, as a person, we all have that gift and that power to make your life meaningful.
Absolutely.
And, I'm getting older, 55, and I regret not to take ownership of my life when I was in New York, because I could have, I'd probably be on my 5th cookbook now.
Coming up with Bruno, really difficult.
But I don't want to be too hard on myself, but I know the next 10 years, I don't want to waste anything, and it's not like I want to become the next Gordon Ramsay, but that opportunity, the opportunity that I have today, I don't want to miss it. And I want to share it too. So by speaking up, I share that opportunity as well with people who.
And so before we finish up, obviously, we have to talk about Series 4. So what are you looking forward to the most about Series 4?
So, I always say it's the best job on earth.
Yep.
Because, first you eat cakes all day. Don't stop. You take cakes home, you eat cakes on your day off, because some of the stuff is delicious. James, on season.
I love it. James is my Patronus. His bench looks like my bench would look when I cook.
So he made a tourtière, a vegan tourtière.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I'm like, we were all like, that's weird. We beat, like, I cannot wait that moment. That stuff was so delicious, was so good. So I was eating that tourtière on my day off when we were not shooting because it was so good. So we eat thousands of calories, good stuff. I mean,
Oh yeah, lots of good butter.
And then I think it's the human connection that I really enjoy.
Yeah.
You know, having all the host and judge. I mean, I'm lucky because I think I'm the only one who.
Yeah, you're
still,
the consistent.
yeah, on the season 4. I'm the only one on season 4 from starting. But so I'm grateful first, you know.
Yeah.
And then so I meet new host, new judge, new actors. You know, you have coffee in the morning at 6:30 with Dan Levy. I was like, that's so cool. He's a bit grumpy at 6:30, but
Yo.
and
National treasure Dan Levy.
and no, he's not grumpy. He's not very talkative. And he told me, Sam, yeah, at 6 o'clock, because you know we start shooting sometimes so early in the morning.
Yeah.
Oh yes.
So I don't like waking up so early, and I'm not talkative at 6 o'clock. And I'm more cheerful, you know. I show up and like, hey, everybody, yes, everybody. But no, I think it's the whole experience. So I'm looking forward to meet the new judges.
Yeah.
We don't know who they are until very the last minute, just to avoid preconception. So I'm always excited to see who they are, where they come from, their stories. I'm excited about the crew. I mean, it takes a whole village to make it happen.
Absolutely.
60 people working on the crew, and most of them are back year after year. You know, it's the same crew does MasterChef Canada, some of the Food Network shows. So they know that, you know. And this year is going to be a bit different. There is more. We are not allowed to spend too much time together, so it's going to be a bit different on set. There is more strict rules.
But as you sort of said, look at that ability to meet all those new contestants that you sort of said. That's
I think the highlight is always to meet the contestants, and just to. I mean, it takes 8 weeks to shoot, so I'm away from home for 8 weeks. But sometimes I fly back and forth. Sometimes my son comes with me, but this year because of the school, it's going to be a bit different. But just meet new people, and it's an amazing, it's an amazing experience as a chef, as a human being. It's the amount of, like I say, you know, everybody's super chill and very nice.
Yeah.
From the sound, the cameraman, it's like sometimes it's like, and they told me the company who does a production is good to bring the right people.
Yeah.
So the same people does all the show together. So there is this camaraderie on set. There is this like form of respect that you don't find often in other places. So yeah.
And it must like be a bonus for them as well, working in there and being able to grab some cake, you know, at the end of a shoot. I mean, that's got to be like.
Sometimes we fight on the. Because off camera, when we start shooting, people just run with boxes to grab stuff, and you're like, "Where is that cake?" And you know, oh, it's in a van over there. I'm like, "Hey,
the cake is disappearing up the road."
Yeah. Or sometimes you pack boxes because you know the trick now. So when it's finished shooting, you just bring your box and you start, and then your box disappeared. You know, and you're like, "Hey guys, who took my?" And people, everybody looks around. No, I don't know. Do you have a box? You know, so there is this. So on episode 1 and 2, there is a lot of cakes, but towards the final, there is less bakers. The pie is smaller to share. So,
well, it has been an absolute joy and delight to finally get to have this conversation.
The same for me. I'm happy to be. You know, hopefully we do it again.
I very much hope so too. I mean, as I said, you've got a fairly sizable following in Australia for people who have seen the first episode. Mainly because they managed to find it while we were doing the other series. So a lot of people in Australia were really keen. So thank you so much, Bruno.
You're very welcome. Have a great weekend. You already started your weekend, but
indeed.
The future's bright.
The future is very bright. That's the window. So until next time, I'm still Chris.
And I'm still Kristie.
And we will catch you all later.
Ciao.
All right, cheers. Bye.